with Colonel J.J. Burns, commander of the 45 25th Fighter Weapons Wing, I've been watching some of the young tigers of today's Air Force put their fighter aircraft through their paces. This is the Fighter Weapons Center at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. It's here that the Tactical Air Command trains fighter pilots and conducts operational testing and evaluation of our most modern aircraft. I can't help but compare the stick-and-wire aircraft of 1917, when I started in aviation, with the supersonic weapons our boys fly today.
General, we call this the home of the fighter pilot. Nearly every fighter pilot who's been in action over Vietnam has used tactics developed at this base. Their training and aircraft have helped us to achieve and maintain air superiority through the years.
These young men are here for only one purpose: the defense of our country at home and overseas. Our fighter aircraft today have fulfilled the requirement of meeting the challenge to our air superiority. Without that superiority, our nation's general war capabilities would be far from sufficient. Had we been content to say, this is good enough, this is all we need, we would not have had the capability of meeting the challenges of the past or of today. It's been thinking, planning, designing, and producing for tomorrow that has permitted us to meet those challenges. That's been the history of our air power through the years, the ability to develop superior equipment to meet the challenge. We entered World War I with pitifully few trained pilots and ground crews. France had the world's largest air force with some 1,500 aircraft. Germany had about 1,000. We had 50 outdated aircraft. We had failed to visualize the importance of air power. By the end of the war, United States pilots had about 740 planes in Europe. Only 196 of them were American-made. But it wasn't until the 1930s that nations began to spend more money on their air forces and new equipment began to appear in quantity. Airmen developed new tactics, made new speed records, and reached greater ranges. At the outset of World War II, the Nazi juggernaut rolled unchecked over Europe. Large ground armies were unsuccessful against Hitler's hordes because Nazi air power dominated the skies. One nation after another was crushed, and Great Britain had no allies left in Western Europe. Only England remained undaunted, unconquered, uninvaded. Hitler boasted that he would march into London. And the German Air Force began blasting British cities, dockyards, factories, and airfields. England fought for its survival. The valiant little island staggered under the rain of death and destruction. The Royal Air Force, outnumbered, but with better planes and superior pilots, finally won the Battle of Britain. It was the turning point of the war because England proved it could defeat the Nazi Air Force with better defense armament, more effective tactics, superior air power, and the indomitable spirit of her pilots. At the height of the battle, the British estimated that the German air losses totaled 2,698 planes. British losses were 915 planes. The British had gained air superiority. The tiny Royal Air Force also formed an aerial umbrella to repel German bombers as more than 336,000 British, French, and Belgian troops waded out to British rescue ships lying off Dunkirk. In the meantime, a neutral America began to expand its armed forces to build defense plants, airplanes, and give the Allies all-out aid short of war. We were the arsenal of democracy. But suddenly, on December 7th, 1941, we were no longer neutral. 360 Japanese aircraft attacked our Pacific Fleet units at Pearl Harbor, Army aircraft at Hickam Field, and other nearby military installations. In just 2 hours, every American naval ship in port had been sunk or damaged. 152 Army Air Corps planes were destroyed. 78 naval aircraft on Oahu were destroyed. We were caught by surprise and learned again the importance of air superiority. Japan went on to conquer the Western and Southern Pacific and expected the Allies to surrender. But she soon realized we would never allow them to keep their newly conquered territories when carrier task forces raided the Marshall, Gilbert, and Marcus Islands in 1942. Earlier that same year, I was directed to lead 16 twin-engine bombers in the first air raid on Tokyo. The Japanese had believed that our planes could never reach their homeland. These and other early actions were the beginning of the end of Japan's dream of conquest. In Europe, we had established the U.S. Strategic Air Forces, and our pilots flew the Flying Fortresses and Liberator heavy bombers in raids on enemy oil refineries, factories, and airfields. The bombers operated under an umbrella of Thunderbolt, Lightning, and Mustang fighters that carried extra tanks for the long ranges required. And when Allied ground troops invaded Europe, our fighters again proved superior to Nazi aircraft. Toward the end of the war in Europe, the Germans, pioneers of jet propulsion, surprised us with a twin-engine jet fighter, the Messerschmitt 262. But it came too late to turn the tide, and under Hitler's orders it was often used to attack ground targets instead of our bombers. In both Europe and the Pacific, Allied air power was a decisive factor in the outcome of World War II. It also proved beyond a doubt that although an air force may not win a war by itself, a superior air force is the key to preventing war and to winning it if it starts. We knew we were not alone in this realization and began planning for the Air Force of the future. It was a period of great change. Propeller aircraft were rapidly becoming obsolete for many jobs, as newer planes with jet or rocket engines were designed and developed, planes that could outrace the speed of sound. The production of jet aircraft didn't prevent the war in Korea, but the records show we had superior airmen and aircraft. It was the first full-scale clash involving jet aircraft, and the F-86 led the way in the destruction of 984 MiG-15s in aerial combat. We lost 94 aircraft. With control and command of the skies, our fighter aircraft made it possible for our bombers to work with ground forces in throwing back numerically superior communist troops. Our aircraft were responsible for the destruction of 70% of the North Korean tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces, as well as 47% of their personnel casualties. In the uneasy years that followed, our ability to quickly deploy air, sea, and ground power proved to be invaluable in preventing the potential flames of war in many parts of the world. And when communist China sent her jet planes against Formosa, nationalist pilots flying American-made jet fighters caused heavy casualties. Communists supported the effort and have not returned. Now we are engaged in combat in a little republic in Southeast Asia, South Vietnam. The Air Force has established bases there and also operates out of Thailand. General George S. Brown is the commander of the 7th Air Force in Vietnam.
The war in Vietnam has seen air power applied in both the classic and new conventional roles. It has been a critical test of our men and their equipment. close air support and air superiority are only a part of the story. Some 29 types are represented in Southeast Asia, from the aged C-47 to the supersonic F-4 Phantom. In this war, we have been operating in an environment of almost total air superiority. We were repeatedly challenged during the raids against major military target complexes in North Vietnam, and Air Force pilots recorded more than 85 MiG kills.
Doing a pretty good job on the bombs, and as we came on out, some MiG-17s had missed their attack on the first time, so they came through trying to take us out on the way home. And was flying with a real fine gentleman by the name of Colonel D.O. Williams, and he showed me a classical attack, I guess, out of the World War II, and they'll always be the same, as out of the sun, 30,000 feet in afterburners, and just went diving in on those little dudes. And picked off one before he ever knew what hit him. We were through him, and a sparrow had blown off a wing and a tail end of the airplane, and we were back out the other side and climbing right back into the sun. And tried the same maneuver again and missed one, but one of our fellow flight members got a second one on the second pass through. That was
it's a good day, huh?
It was a real good day.
And behind these impressive aerial achievements are skilled maintenance teams working round the clock to keep the missions on schedule.
How was the flight, sir?
Oh, great. They had a little trouble in the target area, holding too much to get the ground forces separated so we could do some bombing, but great mission, and your airplane's in great shape. No problems at all with it.
The primary function of a fighter aircraft is to seek, meet, and destroy whatever aircraft the enemy may send against us. Today, our fighters have been modified to accomplish a number of other missions, like the German Messerschmitt of World War II. We do not have a true air superiority fighter today devoted specifically to the major task of sweeping the skies of enemy aircraft. Today, communist forces are concentrating on building fighter aircraft that will achieve that single-purpose function. They have not only modified their standard aircraft, but have introduced 6 new types of fighter plane. We have modified our aircraft through the years, particularly the F-4 Phantom, to improve our weapon systems. Thus far, these modifications have been adequate. Early in 1969, the Air Force, in the largest overseas deployment of tactical aircraft for a peacetime mission ever undertaken, demonstrated Uncle Sam's contributions to the defense muscle of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Participating in the exercise were 4 squadrons of F-4 Phantoms. Since its first flight in May 1958, the F-4 Phantom has been writing remarkable chapters in the history of fighter aircraft. Its performance has been so outstanding that the 3 air arms of the United States have selected it for service. It is our nation's first-line interceptor, fighter bomber, and escort aircraft, performing every classical fighter mission ever conceived. free enterprise system is a dynamo for creativity, the likes of which the world has never known. Our products have been the best for years. Our aircraft the finest in the world.
These are some of the young tigers who will become a part of the Air Force of tomorrow. They come from colleges and universities across the nation, and they come from the cities and towns of America, every race, color, and creed. At the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, young men are in the process of becoming Air Force officers.
The men who wear the Air Force blue are among America's finest. Give them the tools, and they will meet the challenge. They will ensure an adequate and immediate defense of freedom at home and respond to requests for help any place in the world where freedom is challenged.